Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. I'm here with my worthy constituent, Dr. Murray McCormick, and we're going to discuss, well, even though the Rough Riders haven't played since we last recorded a podcast, lots has changed, so we'll have that to chew on. Candy's got her bone to chew on, but look at her. She's laying on her back. Isn't she adorable, Mur? Can you see her?
Yeah, she is adorable.
She's a beautiful dog. It's her latest. Oh,
how's that? Hey, there's my 5-month-old grandson, Andrew.
Got to get Finley some time too.
Yeah, I think she's back in school today. I'm not 100%.
That's right.
Yes, so that's a big day for my 8-year-old granddaughter.
September 1st. How did September get here? It's so weird. It's September and the Rough Riders have played 3 games. This is new.
Yeah, no.
Although it's weird to look back at like 1951 or something. They played their first regular season game in like late August. So it's not unprecedented to start it this way, but it's sure is different for us. They'd normally be at the midseason mark right now.
Like the Labor Day game has always kind of been a bit of a rejuvenator for me. We kick up the old because you've gone through 8 or 9 games, training camp and all that stuff, and you're a little bit. I wouldn't say you need something to get you going. It's always that old phrase that the second season, the real season starts on Labor Day, but it just seems so weird with only 3 games under their belt that we're in the Labor Day and we're into the so-called second half of the CFL season. That it just, I don't know, it seems kind of surreal in a sense. And maybe it goes along with everything that's happened in the last 18 months, that it's just something that's so different that we're just reacting to it. And it's here, it's Labor Day. It's going to be a different game. We know that. I don't think there's going to be the party in the park. It's not going to be as much of a party fest, I guess, as it has been in the past. Maybe in the stadium will be, but maybe not as much outdoors. We'll have to see how many Bomber fans come. I know it's sold out, which usually means there's a fair number of Bomber fans in the crowd, but are they going to make the trip here?
And will they be vaccinated? Will this be their only will this be the only chance for unvaccinated Bomber fans to see their team play in person this year? Yeek. It's interesting though. You mentioned traditionally the real season doesn't begin until Labor Day. I wonder if that still applies this year, despite the abbreviated season that we have witnessed to this point. In that the Rough Riders and Bombers are clearly the class of the West, and they're playing back to back. And if one team sweeps this home and home set, I wonder if that effectively decides the West Division, especially if the Riders do it. And suddenly they're 5-0, and the Bombers are then 3-3. That could be massive. Or the Bombers, conversely, the Bombers end up at 5-1, and the Riders end up at 3-2. So I mean, a sweep of this could go so far toward deciding toward deciding who plays host to the West Division final, and yet we're only 3 games into the season from the Rough Riders standpoint, 4 from the Bombers standpoint. But it's also a short season, and these are the only 2 times this year that what seem to be the two best teams in the West Division meet. The likelihood is it'll be a saw-off and nothing will be resolved.
Yeah,
that's been the tradition. But how do you predict anything this year? I picked the Riders for 4th and the Bombers for 5th, so I'm not really too confident in my prognosticative skills these days.
I think you still have time for those to come true.
I got Ottawa right. Give me credit for getting Ottawa right.
I think everyone's going to be right about Ottawa. It's kind of interesting. It's the first time the Riders and Bombers have met in the first top 2 teams in the league since when? 2019, when they were both 1 and 2 in the CFL standings, in the West Division standings.
Well, Bombers were 3rd that year.
The 3rd?
Yeah. Calgary was 2nd.
Oh, why did I read that? Oh well, sorry about that. I'm not going to do any more research for Rider Rumblings. That ends it.
But could this be like 2007 potentially, when it was clear that the Riders and Bombers looked like such good teams coming into that Labor Day weekend clash, and of course that was the Kerry Joseph 27-yard quarterback draw with 6 seconds remaining. I wonder, this game kind of has the same sort of feel. The Rough Riders, obviously, they were, I think, 6-2 going into that game. There obviously isn't the body of work behind this Rough Rider team, but I think it's pretty clear right now what the upper echelon in the West Division consists of, and I just wonder if it's going to have that 2007 sort of feel to it.
Yeah, can I say that's my favorite Labor Day classic? I know we're going to, because and I think kind of the ways, like, it was Kerry Joseph's that big run, he gets that big draw, the 91-yard drive. I was just reading this story about it, and it was, I think my lead was a classic Sunday drive for the Rough Riders, and it was such a great lead. And I'm back in the day. And I remember it's such a, because we know how the season ends too, eh? So the Labor Day Classics, even on a bigger sort of picture and a bigger moment than that, because we know it ends up with that. And that was such a great run by Kerry Joseph, and a great crowd and people just going bananas. And I still remember that as probably being probably my favorite Labor Day Classic memory. I know we want to get into that right now. Or you can have one too, but you have to have been born first. I'm going to
Well,
limit you to how you've been born.
the first Labor Day Classic was in 1951. The Bombers beat the Rough Riders 24-22, and the Bombers, I think, were trailing 22-6 in the fourth quarter, and Jack Jacobs came into quarterback the Bombers and threw 3 touchdown passes, and the Bombers beat Glenn Dobbs and the Rough Riders 24-22. The Riders ended up going to the Grey Cup that year, and the Bombers didn't. And that was the game that basically put the Labor Day weekend game on the map. They'd been playing them as far back as the 1930s, but that was the first one that was really a classic per se. Beyond that, it really wasn't even given that the Rough Riders would even play the Bombers on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I remember
But
that.
this is 1982 that series began becoming an annual thing. But I remember 1976 and Ron Lancaster getting drilled by Bill Baker, being helped off the field late in the game. It didn't even look like Ronnie would be able to come back. You thought the season was in cinders at that point. Riders punt the ball away. John Shira retrieves the punt. Pete Van Valkenburg recovers a fumble, and the Riders suddenly have the ball on the Lions' 42-yard line. And 4 plays, 42 yards later, they're in the end zone. Ron Lancaster to Rhett Dawson on 3rd and 10 from 18 yards away, and the Riders win that game. And that wasn't. And then Ronnie had to limp back onto the field. I remember the suspense in the stadium that day when Ronnie, does he take off his warm-up jacket? Does he come onto the field? And then he kind of just limped onto the field and directed a game-winning touchdown drive. And that was the first one that I think of when I think of classics. That one was just absolutely amazing. You got the Rocky Butler game in 2002. You've got the Joe Paopao to Ray Elgard touchdown pass in 1986, and the Riders beat the Bombers only a few weeks after losing 56-0 in Winnipeg. That might be the most improbable Labor Day victory, next to the Ken Clark game in 1983. And Ken just passed a few weeks ago, but Ken Clark, the Riders punter, kicks the game-winning field goal 41 yards into the wind the day after getting back from the bedside of his dying mother. So you've got there's so many great Labor Day classics, but that Ken Clark game will always be my favorite. And you covered that game too. We talked about that.
I remember standing in the scrum admiring this guy. It was kind of just a youngish, hard to believe I was young once. I was in Moose Jaw Times Herald at the time and admiring how he handled all those tough questions and thinking, man, if my mom had died, I'd be hiding in the training room bawling. Maybe he probably did. He was such a classy gentleman. I just want to, don't forget 2019 was a pretty memorable Labor Day Classic.
It was the Pill Country Sprint.
Pill Country Spill, and I don't know if he'll get it. If that happens this year, he won't be allowed to do that this year because he can't. Well, first off, that first row is just blocked off, and secondly, they're not allowed to do it. But that was a pretty memorable. That was a pretty cool one, to see Brett Lowther. And the part that I remember about that, and that's just a media thing, he wasn't around to do interviews after the game. Like, it's funny, people see Brett Lowther, he seems really, he's not really kind of likes being in the media spotlight. He kind of likes being in the background a little bit.
He's great when he does it.
I know, it's just amazing to see that a guy wouldn't want to be there to celebrate perhaps one of the biggest games in his CFL career. And we all know his CFL career. Wouldn't be there to want to kind of talk a little about it. But I remember looking around and waiting around for him to come out of the shower. And then I finally noticed his clothes were gone. So he was gone before we were even in the locker room. But what a great moment. I just happened to see the highlights of that again. He's waving. Him and John Ryan are running down the field, and Brett throws his helmet up in the air, and you can see John Ryan trying to find it so he doesn't get coca-bonked on the head with the helmet. So that was a pretty cool thing. And all the fans and the beer being poured on. It was just, that's a fresh memory, and it reminds you of what this Labor Day Classic game can be. I'm going to bring up another little point. Do you remember that house on the corner? Katie Corner from Taylor Field, where all the Bomber fans used to come and party. I don't think you ever went there very often before the game, and they just fill the guy's yard, just be filled with Bomber fans. Jammed. And it was such a great feeling to go in there, because even the
Bomber fans and Rider fans, it was all very convivial.
And they weren't drunk yet, so they weren't fighting amongst each other or stuff like that.
They weren't drunk yet?
Well, okay, they were drunk, but they were still lovingly drunk. Might be the best way. But I used to love going wading into that crowd and just trying to and talking to them and sort of bringing all the feelings of what the Labor Day game means to people and means to Saskatchewan and means across the league with Hamilton and Toronto and the other. I don't think it's only 2 Labor Day class. Oh, Calgary and Edmonton. That doesn't happen. Yeah, and that's what they mean to the game. And I think in a season like this where there's been so many challenges and so many things the CFL has and hoops it's gone through to get, maybe it's more of a celebration of the Labor Day Classic, which everything's good about the CFL. And let's hope it's a memorable game with someone doing something in the last minute to win. You and I, we don't care who it is as long as it's a good story. It's a better story if the Riders win, but regardless what happens, I think they're arguably 2 of the best teams in the league right now, and I think they should produce a game that's going to be memorable. Don't you?
Yeah, I just don't see how there can't be something to talk about after this game. You look at 2004, the Rough Riders lost 19-6, and there was a lot of controversy about an interception Henry Burris threw, but I don't think we're going to get one of those type of duds. I really don't. There's just too much here for this game not to be eventful. Even if the game itself isn't especially memorable, I think just because of what's at stake and what we've missed out on, I think it'll assume even a greater degree of importance than it ordinarily would, which is a pretty high degree of importance to begin with. I think it was Labor Day weekend last year when it really sunk in that there wasn't a CFL season and there wasn't going to be. So this year all the games have felt cool. There's an extra pleasure to be derived just from sitting in a press box again. Yeah. So I think there'll be that times 8 on Sunday. I'm really looking forward to wading into it. And then the week after, there's actually a road game. Imagine that.
A road game. I'm going on the road. See you, Marion. I'm having a tough time getting my government approved these vaccine form I can't get through the phone lines. So
yeah, my wife tried it too, and she's been unsuccessful.
I've been trying for 2 days now, and I keep trying and trying. I tried him this morning at 8:30. So if anybody has any tips on what a guy can do, because I'm going to need that to get into the Bomber Stadium, but that's next week. How about the juicy storylines, Rob?
Oh my goodness.
Let's just talk to the top one off the top of our balding heads. Cody Fajardo versus Zach Collaros. I know they played in the West Final. We understand that. We know they played. That was such a big game, but I still think this feels like the first time they played for some reason. I don't know. It just seems juicier than even that West Final because there's a Grey Cup on the line for that West Final. It just seems to see what the two guys have done since that one hit, three plays in the 2019 season, how it changed both their lives so dramatically, and it changed fates. Yeah. You look, Zach gets traded, Toronto gets traded, Winnipeg wins 4 in a row, wins a Grey Cup. Boom.
Yeah, now Zach Collaros comes here as a Grey Cup champion. Yep. Previously, when he'd come here, there had been question marks, and there were question marks last time the Rough Riders played Winnipeg at Mosaic Stadium, and then how is Cody Fajardo going to play because he had the torn obliques, and it turns out many other injuries that he'd been playing through. So now they seem to be on more of a similar plane right now because for one, they're both healthy and they're quarterbacking, I think, the two best teams in the CFL right now, and this has sort of a playoff feel to it already. And we remember how that game ended on November 17th, 2019, with the Cody Fajardo pass hitting the upright, and that is still the last time, or pardon me, the crossbar, and that's still the last time the Riders and Bombers have played one another. And you just factor in the traditional rivalry and it just everything. I just can't. There's the Naaman Roosevelt. I'm not sure if he's playing this weekend, but
I would doubt it.
Naaman Roosevelt's such a smart guy. I don't think it would take very long for him to figure out the playbook, and he does have that pass association with Zach Collaros. But
he's not going to be. I don't think he's going to be able to practice till Friday. So that's like one practice and a walkthrough and step into the. He's a smart man and he understands the CFL. I think that's even asking a lot. And why not wait a week and have him play in the Banjo Bowl?
Yeah.
But that's
if they want to eliminate the drop passes, just put him in the lineup.
Exactly.
So, Andrew Harris playing here. His second game back after missing the first few, and we saw the impact he had in the first his first game of the year. So last year it wasn't, or 2 years ago it wasn't Andrew Harris in the Labor Day Classic. It was Johnny Augustine. Yeah. So who actually played very well that day. So I'm looking forward to this. This is
How about the
going.
defensive ends, Rob? Let's talk about
Oh,
them. These are
geez,
four of the best
that's going to
defensive
be
ends.
amazing.
You know, you have Woodard and AC Leonard for the Rough Riders, and you have Jeff Coat and Willie Jefferson, who I think is the best defensive end in the league. I think he's the best defensive player. Obviously, he earned that. He owns games. Like, he just takes over games with his size and his speed and his, just imagine how good he was with the Riders. And he keeps improving. I don't understand how a guy like that can't get a chance in the NFL. You know, he's one of the few guys I think that should have had a chance, but he's so embraced the CFL world, the CFL life. You watch him on Twitter and he's showing his family. Well, I know him a little bit, and he seems to be a good guy and everything, all that, which we often say a lot. But boy, this gives him the Riders have an offensive line that's been playing better, but boy, this is going to be a real test for the two tackles out there. Like Andrew, we'll find out today if Brett Boyd goes back. But even if Andrew Lauderdale is,
why mess with it?
Yeah, you should leave him alone, let him see what happens there. But they're going to have their hands full, and we're going to have to see if Cody's quick release works against a team like the Bombers with a couple of defensive ends that can really close on and put the speed rush on there. So it's going to be a test of Jason Maas's offense with his quick release passes and short things, seeing what happens. And the other side is going to be what we can see what Woodard and Leonard can do against arguably the best offensive line in the league, I think.
The Riders have, to a degree, have schemed around the offensive line situation too. And Cody Fajardo, 2/3 of the time, is getting rid of the ball within 2 seconds. So they aren't asking a lot of the offensive line in terms of protecting him. Now, will it be difficult to throw those shorter passes with 6 foot 400 Willie Jefferson hovering over like just this looming presence? Now, if the Bombers conclude there just isn't time for any defensive lineman, even one as superlative as Willie Jefferson, to actually get to the quarterback, getting the Rough Riders scheme. And Derek Taylor and Luke Mullender talked about this quite a bit on the Sports Cage on Monday. Does Willie Jefferson end up becoming almost like another linebacker, and he kind of the specter of Willie Jefferson in coverage? Do we see a interception or a lot of knockdown passes by Willie Jefferson? They're going to have to scheme around him to begin with, but if it's just futile to expect anybody to get to the quarterback in 1.5 seconds, how did the Bombers use Willie Jefferson to their advantage? Because he's not just to their advantage as a pass rusher.
Remember, in 18, has he still crossed the goal line in 18 yet? Do you think he's crossed?
Goodness, that was slow.
That was so funny, sitting in the press box at IG at Winnipeg. The Blue Bombers stadium is tucked away in the corner, so you could see him coming. And it was like boom, boom. Is he ever going to cross the goal line? He should
have been called for delay a game before he even got to the end zone. And that is going to be an interesting aspect of the game. The whole Willie Jefferson impact upon the Riders' scheme, upon the football game. The Rough Riders, I think they have to start establishing a run.
That's what I'm
thinking. We haven't seen that in 2 of the 3 games. William Powell played very good and very well against Hamilton, but over the course of the year, there really hasn't been much running room. I don't think it's a William Powell issue as much as the offensive line is earned plaudits so far. They haven't really been challenged as far as pass protection, and they haven't been consistently effective in allowing a running game to exist. William Powell's carried the ball 40 times this year. Only 2 of those carries have produced double-digit gain. And in both cases, that's a 10-yard gain. They haven't been able to really break anything. The Riders' longest run by a running back this year is Keenan LaFrance, 1 carry for 12 yards. They got to get William Powell going because, and again, this is something that Derek and Luke talked about in the Sports Cage. If you end up in 2nd and long against this Bomber defense time after time after time, you're going to be in trouble. And if you're just a one-trick pony trying to throw these 4 or 5-yard passes to get your 5 or 6, 5 yards on first down, I think it's pretty easy to crowd the Rough Riders receivers, and then how do you get those 4 or 5 yards? So you've got to have it planted in the Bombers' heads that the run may be an option as opposed to here's a quick pass to Kyran Moore or Braden Lenius to get those 4 or 5 yards. So the running game has to get going, and it can't just all be Cody Fajardo carrying the running game. It's got to be William Powell.
Isn't that just as effective? It's Cody doing that, though. Doesn't that make him more effective as a quarterback when they have to respect his run and get Powell out there blocking for him, which he's been doing? So maybe Cody, accentuate Cody's running ability to make up for Powell and have Powell as a blocker and that stuff.
Yeah, but at some point, you still have to be able to have.
You still have to be able to run the ball when you got to be able to run the ball.
When you're looking at the preservation of your quarterback, if there's say 20 rushing plays to be had during a game, If William Powell isn't one of them, isn't getting most, or at least half of them, or 2/3 of them, that's just extra hits that your quarterback is going to absorb, and that's a Bombers defense that's pretty fierce. So again, there's a certain element of risk once you introduce your quarterback into that equation too often. If he's scrambling on his own, there's, I think, oftentimes the option to exercise some discretion and slide into the turf or run out of bounds. But if it's a called running play, and if he becomes the bulwark of your running attack by design, and you have to design a certain amount of your running game around Cody Fajardo, or you're not maximizing his talent. But if that becomes your preoccupation as opposed to using your standard tailback, to me, you're really flirting with disaster there. Then they're one hit away from their season going from promising to porridge in about all too quickly.
And don't forget who's waiting in the middle for him to come across. And Adam Bighill. And Adam Bighill had some big hits. He's a great player to watch too. Just
any of them on that Bomber defense. Brandon
Alexander can pop people.
They're going to need a traditional running game, and especially if you look at the way this season is going to go. The Riders go as far as they want to. They're playing football in December, and so you're going to need a basic running game there, and you look how beneficial that can be for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, whether it's Andrew Harris, Johnny Augustine, Brady Oliveira. They've shown that they can do that. The Rough Riders to this point have not, and that's one of the huge question marks looming over this team. Is can they run the football? And it's not like you get a half season or 2/3 of a season with optimal weather to build up a real head start and concentrate on the pass. I think you've got to have your running game in place if you want to enjoy some longevity this season.
Especially with, there's some uncertainty with the receiving core. Like Shaq Evans is out. We don't know what Jordan Williams-Lambert's status is. We'll probably find that out, this week. What's he going to be looking forward to because he wasn't hurt. So. Those are two pretty key. McRobertson.
Oh, it was Micah Johnson. That's another question.
Micah Johnson. Yeah, and there's a great column I just read. I can't remember who wrote it.
Oh, thank you.
Someone mentioned that. Well, I know where it was. But mentioning Micah Johnson is playing much better than people think he is. He's just.
That was the insider talk. John Hodges with 3 Down Nation.
That was it today. And I've always agreed. I was even in Micah Johnson's corner in 19. People kept saying he wasn't playing that well. He just didn't have the sack numbers, but I still think. He was drawing the double teams and doing those kind of things on what looked like to be a high ankle sprain, which took a long time and it looked like he re-injured that. He hurt an ankle when he was being carried off the field or walking off the field the last time the Riders played. So that's a big loss. But I think, can McRoberts step up? Loss. Yeah. McRoberts step up again? Can Keon Schaefer-Baker step up? He had a great game, great start. I loved how he went out into the middle of the field and just soaked in the atmosphere after that win. And you kind of remember that this is a job, but it's also a lifestyle for these guys. They've dreamed, some of these Canadian kids dream of playing in the CFL and to have a game like he did, to go out there and some fans are talking to him a little bit afterwards from a socially distance, which is fair. But, those guys that are going to have to step up, we'll have to see what they do. That's 2 big losses. JWL hasn't quite stepped up as much, I don't think, yet.
Well, now they're playing a wide receiver again.
Yeah, I know. Which I keep going like.
He's not a wide receiver. He's a very good receiver, but he's a slot. But the whole Shaq Evans thing has forced their hand. They obviously feel more comfortable with Paul McRoberts inside, and we saw in the second half of the Ottawa game what Paul McRoberts can do. He was close to a touchdown, made some important plays. He made his first reception in professional football since January 1st, 2017, when he had a 6-yarder for the Los Angeles Rams. So. Yeah, I'm interested to see Paul McRoberts, but the Rough Riders at some point, and it's a tall order against this Winnipeg defense especially, but they've got to be able to show that they can go over the top. Their longest completion this year is 31 yards, and 3 games into after Cody Fajardo's first 3 starts of 2019, they were one of the most prolific teams in the league, if not the most prolific in terms of a deep passing game, and that's been virtually absent. They haven't hit a bomb, so to speak. They've hit plays such as the one to Braden Lenius on the sideline in 3rd and 3 against Ottawa, but they haven't been able to get the big strike. Unlike Winnipeg, say when Zach Collaros goes over the top to Darvin Adams, and they've been able to get Kenny Lawler open on some deeper routes too. So
when he hangs onto the ball,
which generally, he's a good receiver, and we saw that in 2019 when he played so well. Zach Collaros is showing too that he's got a big arm, and he can really sling it. And the Bombers are more dependent, I would argue, than most CFL teams on the intermediate passing game, on going between the hash marks, on throwing the ball further than 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. The Rough Riders and I would argue most CFL teams seems to just pick away with these sort of a focus on incremental gains, whereas the Bombers are more aggressive that way. And I think Zach Collaros' arm and the ability to fit the ball into tight windows, which we've seen from him, that's the kind of element to the passing game that the Rough Riders have yet to introduce into their aerial attack. And I can't believe we're talking about Zach Collaros in this context when 2 years ago at this time we wondered if he ever play another game. Exactly. But he's the sheer arm strength that he has demonstrated and his nimbleness in the pocket, even though he's 33 years old now, he's buying himself lots of time just with his maneuverability in the pocket. And we're seeing elements to Zach Collaros' game we didn't see when he was here in 2018 for a fraction of a season in 2019.
We saw it in 2015 though, before he got hurt. That was the type. He was on pace to be the MOP and do all sorts of good things with the Tiger Cats, and he got hurt. And that's still a thing that Zach has to overcome. He has to have a full healthy season. Like he was healthy 18, he missed 4 games, I think, too. Yeah. He had a concussion in 18.
And then he missed the playoff game too.
Yes, yeah. That's a whole other wasn't that a bunch of gamesmanship, eh? Holy smokes, that was Chris Jones at his best.
But what about the vaccine issue, Mur? I guess we've gone beyond a half hour into this.
I know.
And we haven't discussed what has been the news of the week.
I'm all for vaccinations. I'm all for any incentives that people can get, that we can provide for people to get vaccinated. I'm for. I think the Riders have done. It took them a while, but there's also people who are blaming them. There are also circumstances that dictated what they could do. They made the decision, rightly or wrongly, to follow the rules the government had set up, and that's what they had done. But I still wonder how many people are going to be there on Sunday. I still think people are concerned about them being sitting around non-vaccinated people, even though they don't have to be vaccinated for this one. I think it's going to be an indication of what they think. But you said it right, and you were on top of this issue right from the word go. They have to do it. They had to do something, and this is a good reaction to it. And I think let's all get vaccinated. Let's all join together. I proudly say I'm maximum vaccinated, so I feel comfortable, I guess, going to large crowds. I'm not 100% comfortable, but I'm comfortable. How's that?
It still boggles the mind that there's that much resistance to something that should be so fundamental when we're talking about a virus that is so dangerous and so prevalent, and to a significant degree now so preventable. And you're looking at the national, there's baseball announcers that are being taken out of studio. John Smoltz and Al Leiter, because they won't get vaccinated. We've had NFL quarterbacks who aren't getting vaccinated. How ridiculous is this? Get your shots. And a reader made a really good point when she emailed me the other day. Said, why? She'd really like to see a push where the Riders would be the first team in the CFL to have 100% vaccination of players. And I'll tell you what, if they don't, good luck making road trips to Montreal and Hamilton later this year with a full complement of players. We will see then what kind of peer pressure can be exercised. And that's not a decision that can be made on the spur of the moment. You've got to plan your vaccination life now in order to be able to make those road trips. And if not, the Rough Riders have to take into account this player is not going to get vaccinated, and there's the schedule is so road heavy going into the second half of the year. Does that affect someone's livelihood if they're a vaccinated player and they might be viewed, at least to some degree, as being replaceable? But as much as the Rough Riders can be criticized for taking as long as they did to make that call, they did make that call. And I'm glad somebody made that call, because it sure wasn't going to be the provincial government. No. And, we elect governments, and I'm apolitical. I've voted for pretty much everybody you can vote for politically in terms of federally, provincially. I don't carry any cards except for a vaccination card. But honestly, we elect governments to make these tough decisions. And they're paid very well to make these tough decisions, and to offload the accountability for this on the Rough Riders, and for some members of that organization to bear the brunt of it because they're perceived by the people who are opposed as being the heavies here. I find that reprehensible, in that there's such an abdication of responsibility. And a good government is more about It should be more about just trying to get reelected and trying to appease factions. It should be about doing the right thing. The Rough Riders did the right thing, and I can't say that the same applies to Scott Moe and his people. We've just lost all Saskatchewan Party supporters at the 42-minute mark of this podcast. But honestly, it's good for the Rough Riders. I thought, it's the Rough Riders put their faith in the provincial government and in the authorities and said we will abide by the advice that they provide. And then ultimately, it was just nothing was done at that level, and the Rough Riders had to go it alone. Yeah. And they are going to be now I think the catalyst for other teams, other associations, other venues doing this in the province. We're seeing it already, but in some cases with entertainment venues, for example. But now that the Riders have done that, that pretty much sets the bar for, I would think, for the Regina Pats, for the Saskatoon Blades, for the SJHL, for anything. And the Rough Riders are the catalyst for that. And I again, they're paid well too, and they have a very, very prominent role in the province and in terms of the dictating the mindset of what we do. But this shouldn't have been the Riders' call. The Rough Riders should have been more in a different situation. And but they did make the call, and I applaud them for it. And the response that they're getting has been over the top in some cases, because they shouldn't have to deal with the brunt of the negative feedback.
Also, what is the league going to do with the Edmonton Elks? It's kind of like they're giving them a bit of a pass for that game. They had to cancel because was it 12-13, even 14 at one time?
Yeah.
Because one of them was a false positive, so I can't remember the exact numbers on that.
I think it came in at 13, and they ended up releasing Jacob Ruby on Tuesday.
I know, and he's a smart Canadian offensive lineman, and what he did is just, and it was interesting watching it unfold yesterday on Twitter, that basically he lied to the team. Sounds that way, or didn't lie, just didn't tell the truth. Is that another way to say it?
We may find, and we haven't heard his version of events hasn't yet been told, but. My favorite tweet yesterday was from Rough Rider fan Govind, who said, "We can call this Goodbye Ruby Tuesday."
Yeah, so, that was a good one.
Isn't that a good one? So,
but what does he have? Yeah. It's just like, what do you have to gain by not doing that? Like, I don't understand. Just like,
just get vaccinated.
It's
not that difficult. If you're a team player, get vaccinated. If you've got a medical reason, okay, fine. If you've got a religious reason, that should be respected. Anything beyond that, it just comes down to common sense. And if you're not vaccinated, just because you're I'm sick of people talking about I need to do more research. I need to get more education. Blah blah. If you can't find the necessary research or education, if you considering all the talk that there's been about this for the past year and a half plus, and everything that there is online that is reliable, as opposed to some of the wacko fringes that are posting these theories about 5G and everything else, if you can't find credible research and come to a reasoned conclusion that the benefits of the vaccine far outweigh the detriments, I'm not sure you're worth having on the team anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rob. I think you're not a team
player.
You're
endangering your teammates.
And Gene Mikulski used to say football is the ultimate team game, and this is the ultimate team move to go to follow your teams and go along with them to get vaccinated.
What are you asking? You're asking somebody to get a shot in the arm. How is that different from smallpox, polio, tuberculosis? I mean, honestly.
The travel restrictions won't be in place, I don't think, by the time they make the road trip to Winnipeg.
We're talking October. And who knows if there's a different federal government in power by October, is there a different restriction?
Yeah, so it may be.
This is all coming during the Liberal administration, and the Conservatives may have a different view on that.
So
if they get in.
So just to take you back to the Elks for a second. So what does the CFL do in this situation? They came out with a pretty ironclad COVID policy about if you have too many guys with COVID and you force the league to miss a game, you lose your salaries.
Yeah, it hasn't yet been proven that, or it isn't yet certain that a game will be missed. If they can wedge it into the schedule, fine. But
take a look at the schedule. There's not much room to wedge things in there. And
you look at the Toronto Argonauts and how they're inconvenient. They did nothing wrong, and yet they would have to play on a short week or potentially lose a home game on account of this. Where's the benefit for the Toronto Argonauts? I would consider, penalizing them a draft pick, or just for what's happened at this point.
The penalties are built into the system, though. They came up with a COVID policy that expressed what happens if you can't get the game in. They're right there. It's in black and white. So I don't know, adding other things like draft picks and stuff to that mix seems like watering it
if the
down a little bit.
Eskimo or the Elks, end up disrupting the regular season and the credibility of the regular season to a point where it's just a continual bad look, why not a further sanction against the organization? Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. As an organization did not convey that message well enough for this to prevent this from happening.
Yeah, fell into a masseuse. I thought that was, he inadvertently got a massage. How do you inadvertently get a massage? I know in my world, if I want a massage, it's a pretty.
We could get into that topic, but I don't think that's within our purview.
No.
Unless we're talking about the New England Patriots.
Let's just, as a quick, we're talking a lot about things. How about Jake Maier? Like, you ever seen what an amazing start. What a great weekend for football. I know the games
he gets intercepted twice right off the bat to start his CFL career, and you're thinking, but he's imperturbable.
Yeah, 16 imperturbable. Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. 16 for 16 to start. That's imperturbable. That's pretty good.
Much was made of Cody Fajardo going 15 for 15, so it's again never write off Calgary. They
never
just
ever
find
go.
people. That's what they do. It's in the DNA in Calgary. And I remember in 1995, and there were injuries, and people are, Doug Flutie got hurt. It's like, well, what are the Stampeders going to do? No, there's Jeff Garcia.
Yes,
they find their way out of these problems, and they're doing it again with Jake Maier.
Was it when Henry Burris was hurt too, and they had a whole bunch of guys lined up behind him?
Yeah, I mean, they had Drew Tate, they had Kevin Glenn, they had a young Bo Levi Mitchell.
That's right.
They just kept rolling out people when that's what they do. Even in 2019, and Bo Levi wasn't available. There's Nick Arbuckle, and he came into Mosaic Stadium and blew up the Rider defense, and they're still looking for Reggie Begelton. So that's what the Stampeders do. They just keep finding people, and they found Henry Burris once upon a time. And if you look at it going back to 1999, I believe, and the Stampeders had injury problems in 99, and Henry Burris comes in and lights somebody up. They just find people.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And maybe in our earlier discussion about the Riders and the Bombers being the perceived upper echelon of the West Division, can you totally rule out the likelihood of Calgary by the end of the season influencing that equation, especially when you consider they got 3 games against the Riders where they could really disrupt the balance of power by doing something in that situation, 2 of those games being in Calgary. So those might still be Rider home games.
Well, it's funny. We were looking at the schedule last night, coming off the bye week and stuff. And Marion was my wife says, they play Calgary 3 games in a row? You right? Is this right? What kind of scheduling is that? And I go, it's CFL scheduling. I haven't really seen an explanation why they have to play Calgary 3 games in a row.
You got a situation there's in the East, there's I think teams that play each other 4 times, and yet the Bombers don't play Ottawa at all. So
yeah, it's the
Canadian football.
The COVID football league. They're doing whatever they can to stay on their feet. And it's going to be interesting to see when Craig Reynolds talked a little bit about the vaccines. He also was asked about the financial picture, and it's not getting any better from listening to Craig Reynolds say.
There will be costs to be borne, I'm sure. It's not all going to be on Evraz as far as just making this policy feasible.
It's going to be
there's equipment to be purchased. There's people to be hired in short order. And I'm not sure I'd be really excited about being one of those people who's dealing with tens of thousands of people one-on-one and with the pandemic in its 4th wave. I'm not sure people are going to be lining up for that job or for those jobs. But there's security. There's talk of a demonstration or a rally outside the Mosaic Stadium. So I mean, yeah, I mean so that necessitates at least making sure the security costs are likely going up.
Tim Meany, who's the president and CEO of Real, said, basically said it's going to be on the fans. It's going to be on season tickets. The extra money it's cost is going to be put on season tickets. It's going to be on concert tickets. So the money it costs to do this is going to ultimately be on the people going to the event, which is just ultimately who should pay for it. I think that's the same with the game licensing fee too. If you're going to want new things and pretty toys and things at a stadium, you're going to have to pay for it out of your tickets. Are you still with me?
Yep. Just I'm looking for our little thing to read at the end of this.
Okay, good.
So I can have it queued up this week as opposed to sitting on it like I did last week. And, what do we do while we're killing time here? Okay. So now we're killing time here. Where's my voice changer app, Mur?
Don't know.
There it is. Well, I should let you, as we talk, it's 11:24 a.m. on the first day of September. How did it become September already? And
Sure rolled in last night though.
my
Holy
goodness, I went to
smokes.
the Y last night, and there was such a difference between South Regina, where I reside, and Northwest Regina, where the Y is located. And there was on McCarthy Boulevard, there was a car marooned in a puddle. The ring road had some deep puddles in it. I barely made it through one of them. The parking lot at the Y on Rochdale was just. I thought, did it snow here? Oh my God, that's hail. And and the branches all over the place.
Funny, and I live in the East End, and we have a big wind like that. I have some willow trees in the backyard. Usually there's branches all over the yard. There's one branch on my yard today. And I opened up the side door because I heard the hail, and one hit me on the head, and it hurt. It was just a little tiny piece.
I hope the piece of hail is okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Sorry. You should have worn a helmet. Helmet.
It was a Hail Murray. It was a Hail Murray. Sorry.
Well, now we're just getting silly. It's my fault. Let's get sillier and play the little disclaimer. This is the influence of our producer Mark Melnichuk, who insists that we play this or we'll be shot or something.
If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll read it on the air. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Vanstone or Murray at MurrayLP.
Isn't that impressive?
If you enjoy the podcast,
it goes on a loop.
Anyway, I think we're going to call it quits. That's traditionally our way to end this. We'll be back.
Well, get us out of this, customer.
We'll be back either probably next Tuesday. Looks like the way it's going to be. I think that's the way things are shaping up. Things got a little mixed up with the bye week that we moved it back a week, I hope.
After the conclusion of this podcast, who knows if we'll ever be back. But
yeah,
we'll see if we can salvage things. This is what clever editing is for.
Well, we had the Hail Murray. Maybe we'll have a prayer that'll get us back online again.
But it's going to take something. We need help. You've probably ascertained that by now. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone. For the moment, we're employed by the Regina Leader Post, and we hope to still be so a week from now. Take care. Enjoy the game this weekend. Stay healthy and stay safe. Thanks for your time today.